Why was she the only one on the deck before sunrise, loading weapons meant for war? The USS Defender cut through the South China Sea like a steel leviathan, its shadow stretching across dark waters that shimmered under the thin veil of pre-dawn light. On the flight deck, sailors still yawned into their coffee cups, their laughter breaking the silence of another day at sea. But one figure moved differently, not with the lazy rhythm of routine, but with the precision of someone who had measured their life in seconds and survival in choices. Lieutenant Commander Alina Blackwood's hands were steady as she guided the Tomahawk missile into its cradle. Nearly 3,500 pounds of steel, fuel, and precision engineering slid into place as though it weighed nothing more than memory. The kind of memory she tried not to touch. Around her, young officers muttered. They thought she couldn't hear. "That's her, the ballast witch," one of them snickered under his breath. 6 months on board, doesn't talk, doesn't smile. "She must have screwed up big time in D.C., another added. "You don't stick a lieutenant commander on missile loading duty unless someone up top wants her gone." Their voices drifted across the deck, carried by salt air and ignorance. Alina didn't flinch. Her eyes stayed fixed on the weapon, her shoulders slightly hunched as if she could fold herself into invisibility. She had become good at that, being overlooked, being dismissed. Better that way. Safer. A young sailor stumbled against her shoulder, nearly jarring the missile from its track. He muttered something apologetic without meeting her eyes and hurried on. She steadied the load, the steel pressing back against her calloused hands. The scar across her palm, thin and white like a faded thread, tugged as she adjusted her grip. She caught herself staring at it for a moment too long before pulling the gloves back on. The horizon began to bleed orange. Sunlight caught her profile, the lines carved deep by time and silence, by nights where sleep never came and mornings arrived too soon. Her bunk was waiting below deck, Spartan and impersonal, with a photo turned face down on her desk. She hadn't looked at it in years. Couldn't. 6 months she had walked these halls as a ghost. And still, no one asked why a decorated officer carried herself like a dock worker. Maybe because no one cared. Maybe because they weren't supposed to. When she returned below, the barracks smelled of stale coffee and sweat. Her jacket hung with surgical precision from its hook, ribbons muted by shadow. She sat on the edge of the bunk, pulled off her gloves, and studied her hands again. Strong, calloused, a stranger's hands. The intercom snapped her back. "All senior personnel report to the command briefing room at 800. Not for her. She was no longer senior anything, just ordnance crew. The Navy had a way of burying people without funerals. But someone had been watching. Colonel James Morrison leaned silently against a bulkhead as she passed through the corridor. Civilian clothes, but the bearing of a man forged in wars that never made the evening news. Desert Storm, Iraq, Afghanistan. He had the look of someone who carried entire decades in his eyes. His gaze held her for a moment too long. Not dismissal, not suspicion, recognition. Later in the training room, a young ensign stuttered through a weapons systems lecture. Alina stayed back, blending into the wall like another shadow. But when the ensign misquoted a calibration time, her mouth moved before her brain told her to stay silent. "The Block IV Tomahawk can bypass full calibration in emergencies," she said, voice level but quiet. "Field Manual TC-31B, 47 seconds, not 3 minutes. Silence swallowed the room. All eyes turned toward the woman no one had heard speak before. The ensign blinked. "I don't see that anywhere in the—" "She's right," Morrison's graveled voice cut through. He stepped forward from the back. "It's in the classified supplement." His eyes locked with Alina across the room. A knowing, a memory he wasn't voicing yet. "Good catch, Lieutenant Commander." The words hung in the air like a secret spoken too loudly. After the session, Morrison cornered her in the corridor. "That's specialized knowledge," he said, "not something an ordnance officer would know." Alina's face didn't move. "Just following the manual, sir." Funny thing about memories, Morrison said, lowering his voice. Sometimes they surface at the wrong moment. She froze. For a heartbeat, the mask slipped, her eyes betraying what her mouth denied. I was at Langley in 2018, he added quietly. Observation Room 3, April. The color drained from her face. I don't know what you're talking about, she whispered. But her eyes said everything. Morrison leaned close enough that only she could hear. Your secret's safe with me. Some of us still remember what service really means, and some of us know the best soldiers are the ones nobody sees. He left her standing in the corridor, the careful facade she'd built for 6 months trembling with cracks. By the time she entered the command briefing room that morning, the tension in her chest hadn't eased. Admiral William Hamilton stood at the front, silver hair and sharp eyes commanding the room without effort. Captain Mitchell at his side, proud as ever. Maps flickered across the digital screens, territories overlapping like bruises. Hamilton's voice filled the room. We are entering a complex tactical environment. One misstep, and this exercise could escalate beyond our control. He tapped the console. A Russian submarine silhouette appeared. Severodvinsk class, it's been shadowing us for days. Mitchell's jaw tightened. Our response time is 90 seconds flat. Alina shifted against the wall. 90 seconds. That wasn't true. Not with the system's current delays. She knew it, Hamilton knew it, maybe Morrison too. But Mitchell said it with confidence and no one corrected him. Hamilton's gaze swept the room, pausing, just briefly on her. Recognition flickered there, but it vanished before anyone else noticed. Captain, he said, after this briefing, I want a tour of your Tomahawk systems, a particular interest of mine. As the meeting broke up, Morrison watched Hamilton's eyes follow Alina out the door. His weathered face hardened. Whatever game was being played on this ship, the pieces were worth more than anyone was admitting. That night, Alina worked late in the weapons control room, recalibrating systems by hand. Through the narrow window, she saw it before anyone else, a shadow too sharp against the horizon, a Russian destroyer, modified, electronic warfare class. Her body tensed. Instinct screamed to call it in, but her hand hovered over the alert button and froze. Reporting it would raise questions. How did she recognize the silhouette at this distance? How did she know its capabilities without a reference chart? This wasn't her place anymore. She was ordnance, nothing more. So she turned back to the console, recalibrated every missile by hand, and kept her silence. When she stepped into the hallway, Lieutenant Hawkins blocked her path, too young to be this sharp, too curious for his own safety. There's a Russian vessel approaching from the southwest, he said. His eyes studied her. Utiloy-class destroyer. Strange, isn't it, that they'd be here? Alina forced her expression blank. Wouldn't know, sir. My concern is maintaining weapons, not patrol patterns. Hawkins tilted his head. Interesting, I didn't say it was Russian. He left her standing in the corridor, his suspicion trailing behind like a shadow. That night, alone in her bunk, Alina finally unlocked the footlocker beneath her bed. The dust shifted as she lifted the lid. Inside lay fragments of a life she wasn't supposed to have anymore. Dog tags not her own, a patch torn from a uniform long destroyed, and a folded letter she had never read. She closed it again, pressing the lid down as though she could bury the past with her own hands. But the sea never kept secrets, and neither did scars. What happens when the ship you thought untouchable suddenly bleeds? The USS Defender cut across the Persian Gulf with the pride of American steel, its decks alive with the rhythm of routine. Jets screamed overhead, crewmen moved with practiced precision, and every system glowed green. Confidence ran like current through the ship, until it didn't. The first missile came like a line of white fire slashing the sky. A Russian P-800 Onyx, supersonic, a predator designed to hunt ships exactly like hers. Alarms shattered the calm, sirens, red lights, voices cracking across the comm system. Incoming, bearing 035. Manual override, Aegis offline. Captain James Mitchell froze at the weapon's console, eyes darting across 6 screens all painted in red. His officers hammered keyboards, frantic, desperate, powerless. Targeting systems non-responsive, Lieutenant Parker's voice broke. 30 seconds to impact. The ship would be crippled, hundreds of lives erased. Then someone moved. A woman, standard-issue utilities, unremarkable, invisible, until she was. Alina Blackwood slipped behind a junior ensign without a word. Her fingers hit the keyboard with terrifying speed. Override here. Bypass there. Systems meant to be locked behind codes and clearances suddenly obeyed her as though they had been waiting for her return. "Who the hell are you?" Captain Mitchell started. Her voice cut through the chaos. Low, commanding, tomahawk armed, targeting solution acquired. "What?" "Fire," she ordered. Her hand slammed the key. The deck trembled as the tomahawk burst free, its roar drowning the confusion. In seconds, it met the Russian missile head-on. The sky ignited, 2 predators colliding, disintegrating in fire and shockwaves that lit the Gulf like dawn breaking too soon. Silence fell. Not peace. Not yet. The kind of silence that lives only in the space between survival and realization. Smoke drifted, crewmen stared. Alina didn't flinch. She was already moving again, stabilizing systems, rerouting circuits as though her hands remembered the layout better than the designers who built it. She leaned forward across the console, her shirt riding up, fabric shifting just enough to betray the one thing she never wanted exposed. Scars. Not random, not accidental, not the kind you could explain away. A latticework carved across her lower back, etched deep by fire and shrapnel, the signature of proximity mines designed by Spetsnaz. The kind meant not to kill but to make survivors remember. And someone remembered. In the doorway stood Admiral William Hamilton, his face gone white, his eyes locked on those scars like a man staring at a ghost. He whispered it before he meant to. A name that had lived only in legend, whispered in intelligence corridors like a prayer or a curse. Lieutenant Commander Blackwood. The room went still. Alina straightened slowly, tugging her shirt back down, every movement deliberate. When she turned, her eyes found Hamilton's, calm, steady, hiding nothing but revealing everything. "You were reported KIA," he said, voice raw. "Operation Kingfish, 7 years ago." Her expression remained neutral, but the silence carried weight. The mask of someone who had spent years disappearing in plain sight. "Sometimes," she said softly, "it's easier than explaining what really happened." Captain Mitchell blinked, confused, his mind racing to catch up. He had barely noticed this woman in 6 months. She had loaded his missiles, checked his systems, invisible as dust. And now she had just saved his ship. "Sir, I don't understand." Hamilton's jaw tightened. His hand trembled before it steadied into formality. He raised it in a crisp salute. "Captain Mitchell," he said, voice rising with something like pride and shame entwined, "you have Commander Alina Blackwood on your ship, the ghost of Kingfish." The words hit the room like shrapnel. Some froze, some whispered, most simply stared at the woman who stood silent, her scars saying more than she ever would. The silence broke with a voice over the comm system, elevated readiness, multiple vessels detected on approach. Mitchell swallowed hard, his eyes darting between Hamilton and Alina. She had saved them once already, but the question cut deeper than orders, deeper than rank. Who was she now? And why had she come back? Why did Morrison look at her like he already knew? The mess hall buzzed with clatter and casual talk, trays scraping, boots scuffing. But Colonel James Morrison sat apart, watching. He had that unshakable presence, the kind of soldier who never stopped being on duty even in retirement. He'd seen her hands on the console, seen the speed, the certainty. That wasn't ordnance crew work, that was something else. Later in the dim corridor outside the weapons bay, he didn't bother with small talk. "You see it too, don't you?" Alina kept working, tightening a panel with mechanical precision. "See what, sir?" The formation. His voice dropped. 3 Russian ships in a line, Subarov funnel, Cold War playbook, herding us toward a kill zone. Her wrench paused, a fraction of a second but enough. "I'm just ordnance colonel." "Like hell you are." His words were soft but sharp. "I trained operators for 30 years. I know what those scars mean." Her head snapped up, eyes narrowing. Spetsnaz proximity mines, designed to leave survivors with memories that burn longer than the scars, survivors who were never supposed to walk again. He leaned closer. "And yet here you are." For the first time in months her mask faltered. Not anger, not fear, just the quiet shock of being truly seen. Morrison straightened. "Captain Mitchell's a fine officer, but he doesn't understand what we're facing. This isn't intimidation. This is a hunt, and the question is," his eyes locked on hers, "what are they hunting?" Her answer came so quietly it was almost breath. "Not what, Colonel, who?" The ship's alarms wailed before he could reply. A submarine surfacing, bearing 270, a Severovans class, the kind she'd seen once before, the kind that had ended everything. She whispered it before she meant to. "They're recreating Hormuz." Morrison's head tilted. Same tactics, same class. Her silence was the only confirmation he needed. The past wasn't staying buried. Down in the data center, Lieutenant Brian Hawkins was supposed to be tracking Russian transmissions. Instead, his fingers dug through personnel files, bypassing protocols he had no right touching. Blackwood Alina M. Lieutenant Commander. Current assignment, Ordnance Supervisor, USS Defender. Bland to Bland, her previous post, USS Artemis, Weapons Specialist. His brow furrowed. The Artemis. 3 years ago, a classified incident near the Strait of Hormuz, officially a training mishap. Unofficially, nothing, just silence. Pages redacted until the file was more black than white. He leaned back, chewing the inside of his cheek. Every instinct told him the same thing. This woman didn't belong on missile-loading duty, and yet here she was, in obscurity. When he approached Morrison at lunch, his tone was casual but his eyes sharp. "Colonel, what do you know about Operation Kingfish?" The fork stopped halfway to Morrison's mouth. He lowered it slowly. "Where did you hear that name?" "Just something I came across." A lie delivered too smoothly. Morrison studied him for a long moment, then leaned in. Kingfish wasn't an operation. It was a call sign, ghost team, special units, black work. They succeeded, they didn't exist. They failed, they still didn't exist. And Kingfish. His eyes grew distant. Kingfish was a ghost among ghosts, always against orders, always against odds, and always successful. Hawkins's pulse quickened. "What happened to them?" "Officially, killed in action, but you know what they say about ghosts." Morrison's voice dropped. "Sometimes they don't know they're dead." The young officer sat back, shaken but hungry for more. Morrison, meanwhile, watched him go, a knot tightening in his gut. Hawkins was asking questions dangerous enough to get men killed. And Alina Blackwood was right in the center of it. That evening in the missile bay, Alina worked silently, calibrating systems. But through the narrow window, she saw the horizon shift again. 3 Russian ships, not random, a triangle, tight, deliberate, a funnel formation, classic KGB naval strategy, herding prey toward a waiting predator. Her hands froze on the console, the hair on her arms lifted. She knew it, she had seen it before, she had bled in it before. Morrison's voice came from behind her, rough but steady. He had followed her down. "You feel it too." She didn't look up. "What do you want me to say?" "That you recognize the Subarov formation, that you know this isn't just shadow play, it's a setup." Her hands tightened on the controls. "I'm not supposed to know anything." "Then stop pretending." He stepped closer, lowering his voice. "They're not after this ship, they're after you." Her eyes finally lifted to his, and for a moment the ordnance officer vanished, replaced by the commander she had once been. Hard, sharp, a survivor who had learned to calculate before she breathed. "They'll test us," she said quietly, "once, twice, and the third time." Her voice trailed off. "The third time will kill us." Above deck, Captain Mitchell dismissed the Russians as posturing. "Intimidation tactics, nothing more," he told the crew. But Hawkins leaned over the tactical map, brow furrowed. "Sir, their positions suggest coordinated surveillance. It matches pre-engagement protocols." Mitchell waved him off. "They won't risk escalation." Alina, watching silently from the corner, felt the weight of inevitability pressing down. Mitchell couldn't see it. Hawkins only guessed, but she knew. This wasn't about intimidation. It was about closing a net. And she was the catch. Back in her quarters, the photo on her desk still faced down. The footlocker still sat in dust. She didn't touch it this time. Didn't need to. Because the Russians were already reminding her who she was. And what she could never escape. How many times can a ghost save a ship before people start asking who she really is? The horizon burned red with warning flares. Russian vessels shifted closer, their shadows spreading across the tactical display like a net tightening around prey. On the bridge of the USS Defender, Captain Mitchell held his jaw stiff. "Maintain course, standard defensive posture," he ordered. The young intelligence officer Hawkins leaned forward. "Sir, their formation, this isn't random, it's Suvorov. Classic KGB hunting maneuver." Mitchell shook his head. "They're testing our nerves, that's all." But Alina felt it before the alarms even screamed. "Missile launch detected, bearing 280. The voice over the comms was sharp, panicked. "Impact in 45 seconds. Chaos erupted. Officers scrambling, hands clawing at dead consoles. Aegis still compromised. The ship was blind, defenseless. Mitchell froze, his voice cracking. "Countermeasures, where the hell are my countermeasures?" Alina didn't hesitate. She was already moving, shouldering aside the weapons officer, her fingers slicing across the keys with precision born not from training, but from survival. "Secondary systems online," she said, voice steady. "That system's offline," someone shouted. "Not anymore." The console flickered alive under her hands, targeting solution snapping into focus. Her lips parted in a word the Navy hadn't heard from her in years. "Fire." The ship shuddered as the interceptor tore skyward. All eyes tracked the screen as two blips converged at terrifying speed. Seconds stretched, thick and heavy, until the night ripped open in a flash of fire. Impact, direct hit. A shockwave slammed across the deck, rattling bulkheads, knocking cups and papers to the floor. But the ship still stood. The crew still breathed. Cheers broke the silence, sharp and nervous. Relief rippled across the bridge, but Alina knew better. "That wasn't meant to hit us," she said quietly. "That was a warning." Heads turned. The ordnance officer no one had listened to was speaking with the voice of command. Calm, absolute. Before anyone could answer, Captain Mitchell stormed down to the weapons bay, dragging Admiral Hamilton with him. They found her bent over a console, sweat dampening her collar as she rerouted damaged circuits. "Alina, status report," Mitchell barked. She didn't look up. Primary launch compromised. Secondary online in 3 minutes. As she leaned forward, her shirt lifted again, and there it was, the scars. The Admiral's face drained of color, his voice dropped strangled. "Operation Kingfish." The words silenced the room. Mitchell blinked. "What?" Hamilton stepped closer, his eyes locked on her back, as though staring at proof of a legend he never wanted to see again. "She was reported KIA 7 years ago," he whispered. Hormuz, Kingfish. Alina straightened, slowly, her hands greasy from the console, her face impassive but her eyes alive with defiance. "Hello, Admiral," she said softly. The transformation was instant. Gone was the subservient ordnance officer who loaded missiles in silence. In her place stood a commander, shoulders square, chin lifted, voice sharpened to steel. Mitchell's voice cracked. "Sir, what the hell is going on?" Hamilton's hand trembled before it stiffened into a salute. His voice carried both shame and reverence. "Captain, you have Commander Alina Blackwood on your ship, Ghost Team Leader, code name Kingfish. 7 years ago, she led the extraction at Hormuz." Mitchell's jaw dropped. She's a ghost story." "Not a story," Hamilton said, his voice heavy. "She saved 38 hostages, including my daughter, and she paid for it with her team and with 11 months in Russian captivity." The room went still. Alina's eyes betrayed nothing, though something flickered deep, shadows she couldn't bury, even after years of silence. Mitchell swallowed hard. "Why didn't I know? Why wasn't I told?" Hamilton's voice cracked. "Because that was the agreement. She wanted no recognition, no exceptions, no rank, just service." Mitchell turned back to her, his voice softer now. "You saved us twice, and I didn't even see you standing there." She said nothing, just stared at the console, her fingers resting against steel that had become her exile. The intercom blared, slicing through the tension. Multiple Russian vessels approaching rapidly, warning shots incoming. Mitchell froze, then looked at her, not as ordnance, not as ballast, but as what she had always been. "Commander," he said, his voice steady, deliberate, "your presence on the bridge would be appreciated." Not an order, an acknowledgement. Alina hesitated only for a second before nodding. "After you, Captain." The three of them moved through the corridor, Mitchell, Hamilton, and the ghost they had almost forgotten. Crew pressed themselves against the walls as she passed, eyes wide, whispers trailing. The ordnance officer who spoke in ghosts, the woman who had saved them from fire. When they reached the bridge, the tactical display painted the truth. 3 Russian vessels in precise formation. A submarine surfaced on the horizon, a predator no longer hiding. "Transmission incoming," the comm officer said. "They're asking for the ship's commander by name." Mitchell stepped forward, but Alina's hand caught his arm. "It's not for you." Hamilton's eyes sharpened. "Play it." The comm crackled, a Russian voice accented and sharp as a knife. "USS Defender, we wish to speak with your real commander. We wish to speak with Kingfish." The bridge fell silent, all eyes turned to Alina. Her face stayed pale, rigid, but her lips whispered a single name. Petrov. Recognition, horror, a past she had tried to bury clawing its way back to the surface. Captain Mitchell leaned close, his voice hushed but urgent. "Who is he?" Her eyes stayed locked on the horizon. "Interrogation specialist, 11 months." The weight of her words landed like a missile of their own. The Russians weren't after the Defender. They weren't after its crew. They were after her. Why did Washington go silent when her name resurfaced? The message came coded, routed through encrypted channels, stamped eyes only. Captain Mitchell read it in his quarters, his jaw tightening with every line. "Maintain standard course. Do not escalate. Do not acknowledge Commander Blackwood's presence on official record." He lowered the paper slowly, the edges crumpling in his grip. His ship was being hunted, his crew shaken, and the woman who had just saved them twice was being erased even as she breathed on his deck. Mitchell slammed the desk with his fist, but when he looked up, Admiral Hamilton was already standing in the shadows, watching. "You received them too," Mitchell said bitterly. Hamilton's silence was answer enough. "Why?" Mitchell demanded. "She saved your daughter, she saved this crew, and they want me to pretend she doesn't exist." Hamilton stepped forward, his voice rough with old scars. Because sometimes recognition is more dangerous than death. Washington buried her once. They'll do it again if we force their hand. Mitchell's hands shook. You mean they'll hang us all out to dry? Hamilton's gaze didn't waver. They already have. Meanwhile, Morrison found her in the ordnance bay, hunched over a panel, pretending the world wasn't closing in. You think hiding here changes anything? He asked. Elena didn't look up. It changes enough. No, it doesn't. His voice sharpened. Petrov isn't shadowing us because of the Defender. He's shadowing us because of you. Her hands froze on the bolts. You know it, he pressed. He's not after Mitchell, not Hamilton, not even this ship. He's after Kingfish. He's after the woman who escaped him. Her breath caught, but she forced her hands to keep working. I'm nobody now. Morrison stepped closer, lowering his voice. Nobody doesn't carry scars like that. Nobody doesn't pull targeting solutions from memory. Nobody doesn't dismantle Russian maneuvers in her head before the analysts even see the pattern. Her eyes lifted finally, burning. And what does it matter? If I step up, I put the whole ship in the crosshairs. If I stay down, maybe they look elsewhere. Morrison shook his head. You don't understand men like Petrov. He doesn't look elsewhere. He hunts until he breaks what escaped him. The silence between them was heavy. Finally, she whispered, then maybe it's time someone broke him. Below deck, Hawkins was chasing ghosts. He bypassed 3 levels of clearance he had no business touching, his heart pounding as files flickered across the screen. Redacted pages, black bars, but patterns emerged. Blackwood Alina M code reference, Kingfish, cross-linked with Project Blackbird. His throat went dry. He dug deeper, each layer more dangerous than the last. Blackbird wasn't an operation. It was a program, special survivability, psychological conditioning, field testing on personnel so covert even Congress never saw the bills. And at the center of one test case, Alina Blackwood. His stomach churned. The program had been terminated. That was the official word, but the language in the file was vague, subjects not decommissioned, assets unaccounted for. Hawkins leaned back, sweat beading his forehead. His instincts screamed that this was bigger than a ghost story, bigger than Petrov. When he looked up, Morrison was standing at the doorway, watching, measuring. You've been digging, Morrison said, not a question. Hawkins swallowed. Who is she? Morrison's eyes hardened. The wrong question. Then what's the right one? Why did they let her live? Up on the bridge, Hamilton stared out at the horizon, the Russian vessels circling like wolves. His mind churned with orders he couldn't follow and truths he couldn't bury. Transmission from D.C. again, sir, the comm officer said. Hamilton took the slip, scanned it, and felt the weight crush his chest. Maintain course. Do not escalate. Under no circumstances allow Commander Blackwood access to command systems. He crumpled it in his hand, too late. Beside him, Mitchell's voice cracked with anger. Are we soldiers, Admiral, or are we puppets? Hamilton didn't answer. His eyes were fixed on the woman down below, calibrating systems with calm precision, as though she weren't the center of 2 wars, one visible, one hidden. That night, Alina lay awake in her bunk, staring at the steel ceiling above her. The sea hummed below. The ship breathed around her, but inside her chest was only silence. She had buried Kingfish, buried Hormuz, buried Petrov. But now Washington wanted her erased again, and the Russians wanted her dragged back into the dark. Her fingers brushed unconsciously against the scar running across her ribs, a reminder, a question. How many times could a person be killed before it finally stuck? In the dark of the control room, Hawkins whispered to himself as he stared at the file he should never have opened. Blackbird. The word hung in the silence like a curse. He didn't notice Morrison behind him until the colonel's hand landed heavy on his shoulder. Close it, Morrison said. I need to know, Hawkins whispered. Morrison's eyes were grim. "No, son, you need to live." But deep in his gut, Morrison knew it was too late. The storm was already here. And it wasn't just the Russians. It was Washington. It was Blackbird. And it was the woman caught in the middle. The ghost who had come back to life. What happens when the man who broke you calls your name again? The comm crackled with static, then sharpened into a voice that sliced through the bridge like a blade. Russian, calm, cold. USS Defender, we know who commands you, we know Kingfish lives. The crew froze. Every eye turned toward her, the ordnance officer who wasn't, the ghost who had stepped from myth into flesh. Alina stood rigid, her jaw clenched, eyes fixed on the horizon as though she could see him there, Petrov. The voice was unmistakable, rough, drawn-out consonants, a cadence she had heard in interrogation rooms where the walls bled with screams. "You escaped once, not again. This time you will return to us, or everyone aboard dies." Captain Mitchell snapped toward the comm officer, "Cut transmission." But Hamilton's hand shot up, stopping him. His eyes stayed locked on Alina, searching her face, measuring something. "Keep it open." The Russian voice continued, slow and deliberate. "You think you are safe under their flag, but their flag did not save you before. We did not forget the mines, the cages, the nights you prayed. We know what you are, Blackwood, Blackbird." The last word hit harder than any missile. Alina's face didn't move, but her stomach twisted. She hadn't heard that name in years, not from Washington, not from her own lips. And now Petrov spoke it like a curse. The bridge fell silent. Mitchell broke it first, his voice tight. "What did he just call you?" She didn't answer, couldn't. Morrison stepped forward, voice graveled but firm. "That's enough. She doesn't answer to you, Captain. She doesn't answer to them. She answers only to the flag she bled for." But Hamilton's gaze sharpened, something dark flickering in his eyes. "Blackbird," he repeated softly, "so it's true." Alina's head turned sharply, her eyes narrowing. "What do you know about it?" The Admiral's lips pressed into a thin line. "More than I should, less than I want. Washington buried Blackbird so deep even I couldn't pull the files, but if Petrov knows, then it was never buried at all." Mitchell's voice cracked. "What the hell is Blackbird?" Morrison's eyes cut to Hamilton, then to Alina. He shook his head slowly. "Not here, not now." But the damage was done. The bridge was no longer united. Suspicion leaked into every glance. That night, Alina sat alone in her quarters, hands trembling as she unlatched the footlocker she had sworn never to open again. Inside, fragments of her captivity, a strip of cloth still stained with her blood, a rusted lock broken from a cell door, a folded note in Russian she had never destroyed. Her fingers hovered over it, afraid of the words, but they echoed anyway, unbidden. "You will break, and when you do, you will not belong to them. You will belong to me." Petrov's voice had lived in her bones for 11 months, and now it had found her again. She shoved the box closed, her breath shaking. The door hissed open. Morrison stood there silent. He didn't ask permission. He didn't need to. "You can't keep carrying it alone," he said. Her eyes were sharp, almost angry. "And what would you know about carrying it?" He stepped inside, lowering himself to sit across from her. His hand shook slightly as he unrolled the sleeve of his shirt. Scars lined his forearm, thin white ridges like rivers on a map. "Fallujah, 2004, he said simply. 4 days in a basement. I know the voice never leaves." Her eyes softened just slightly. 2 soldiers, 2 ghosts. "Then you know why I can't let him win again," she whispered. Morrison leaned closer. "Then stop running, face him." Her throat tightened. "And risk this crew, these kids." "They're already at risk. Petrov won't stop until he has you. Hiding only paints a bigger target." Silence stretched. Finally she nodded once. "Then we make him bleed first." Meanwhile, Hawkins was still digging. The Blackbird files were poison, but he couldn't stop himself. Every redacted line pulled him deeper. Experimental conditioning, extreme survivability testing. Subject survived 11 months of enemy captivity under high duress, classified as asset. His chest tightened. Elena wasn't just a survivor, she was a program, a test, a ghost Washington had tried to erase not because she failed, but because she succeeded. He leaned back, the truth sinking like lead. Blackbird wasn't dead. Blackbird was alive, and she was walking the halls of this ship. Back on the bridge, Hamilton stood alone, staring at the sea. His reflection stared back, older, worn, eyes carrying too many secrets. He whispered it to himself, words the sea swallowed. Orders are orders. But his hand trembled as he touched the comm panel, his message rooted not to Washington, not to Mitchell, but to an encrypted line no one else on board knew existed. Blackbird confirmed alive, Petrov escalating, awaiting instruction. The screen flickered. A reply blinked back faster than he expected. Maintain position. Do not interfere. Asset will be retrieved. Hamilton closed his eyes, the weight crushing. The Russians weren't the only ones who wanted her back. Washington did too. Down below, Elena finally slept, but her dreams betrayed her. Concrete floors slick with water, rusted bars, the smell of blood that never left, Petrov's voice whispering in Russian, promising she would break. She woke with a gasp, sweat soaking her shirt, her hand reaching for a weapon that wasn't there. In the silence, her own thought echoed back. She wasn't afraid of dying. She was afraid of being captured again. And somewhere out there, Petrov knew it. What happens when a crew no longer knows who to follow? The bridge pulsed with red light, alarms screaming, screens alive with hostile signatures. Russian destroyers closed in, their formation surgical. A submarine lurked beneath the waves, predator circling prey. Captain Mitchell's voice cracked over the chaos. Hold defensive posture. Do not engage without direct confirmation from Washington. Sir, they're closing distance, Hawkins shouted. If we don't act now. That's an order, Mitchell barked, his hand trembling on the console. But the crew hesitated. Eyes darted not to him, but to her. The woman standing silent in the corner, shoulders square, scars hidden but authority radiating like gravity. Elena Blackwood didn't speak yet. She didn't have to. The room already leaned toward her. And Hamilton saw it. His voice sliced the tension. Captain Mitchell is in command. Washington's orders are explicit. We hold, no escalation. The crew shifted, torn between the Admiral's authority and the ghost who had saved them twice. Another alarm shrieked. Incoming missile detected, bearing 095. Impact in 60 seconds. Mitchell froze. Hamilton turned to Elena, eyes sharp, testing, waiting. Her hands curled into fists. The silence pressed down until it snapped. Countermeasures are too slow, she said, her voice calm, decisive. Manual override, fire interceptors. Mitchell spun toward her, fury breaking through his fear. You are not in command. But the crew didn't move. They were waiting. She stepped forward, her voice dropping to a quiet steel. 30 seconds, do it. For a heartbeat, no one moved. Then Hawkins slammed the key, his voice cracking. Interceptors away. The missiles streaked skyward. The crew held its breath. On the screen, blips converged. Fire bloomed against the night. The Russian missile disintegrated. The ship still lived. Relief washed the room, until Mitchell's voice broke it apart. You disobeyed a direct order, he roared at Hawkins. You'll face charges. Hawkins stood trembling, but his voice steadied. I followed the only commander saving this crew. The bridge erupted. Shouts, anger, division. Mitchell ordering arrests, sailors refusing. Hamilton raising his voice, calling for discipline, his words drowned in the chaos. And through it all, Elena stood silent, her eyes fixed on the horizon until she finally spoke. Enough. The word cut the noise. Every head turned. She stepped forward, shoulders squared, her presence commanding without rank. This isn't about Washington. This isn't about orders. This is about survival. You know it, I know it. And Petrov knows it too. Mitchell shook with rage. You are out of line. No, Captain, she said softly. You are. The crew shifted, loyalty cracked, discipline bent. And Hamilton's eyes narrowed, a shadow flickering. He wasn't surprised, almost satisfied. The comm system crackled again, Petrov's voice sliding into the silence like a knife. Ah, there she is, Kingfish. Did you think hiding in shadows would save you? No, shadows are where I live. Alina's chest tightened, but she forced her voice steady. You want me, not them. Let them go. Petrov chuckled, low and cruel. Brave words from a ghost, but you know the truth. Washington does not want you. They want me to take you. They are tired of their experiment. The word hit her like a strike. Experiment, Blackbird. The crew glanced between her and Hamilton, questions forming, trust fraying. Mitchell's face paled. What is he talking about? Hamilton's silence said more than words. Alina's eyes locked on him, sharp and accusing. You knew, you've always known. Hamilton didn't flinch. Orders are orders. The crew froze. Mutiny didn't need to be declared. It was already happening. Morrison stepped forward, his voice graveled but firm. Listen to me. Petrov doesn't care about the ship. Washington doesn't care about the ship. They care about her. They care about Blackbird. The word hung heavy. Alina exhaled slowly. I am not your program. I am not your asset. I am the woman keeping this ship alive. Her voice carried, strong, certain. For the first time in years, she wasn't hiding. She was commanding. Stations ready. Weapons live. We break their formation now or we don't get another chance. The crew moved, quickly, without hesitation, not under Mitchell's orders, not under Hamilton's. Under hers. Hamilton's face hardened, rage and something darker twisting his features. He leaned toward her, voice low. You think you've escaped. You think you're free. You're theirs. You'll always be theirs. She met his eyes without flinching. No, not anymore. His hand twitched near the comm panel, ready to send a signal. Morrison's hand landed on his wrist, iron grip. Don't. The two old soldiers locked eyes, Hamilton's authority against Morrison's defiance. For a long moment, neither moved. Then Hamilton pulled back, his eyes cold. You've just signed this ship's death warrant. Alina didn't blink. Then we'll die standing, not waiting. The next salvo came fast. Russian destroyers shifting, submarines surfacing, missile locks painting the Defender. On the bridge, silence turned to focus. Alina at the center, her voice cutting through the chaos. Helm 30 degrees port. Weapons, target lead destroyer. Fire at my mark. Mitchell shouted furious, stand down. No one listened. Alina's hand hovered, her voice calm, mark. The ship roared, tomahawk streaking across the waves. On the screen, fire bloomed, Russian hull torn open. One wolf staggered, its shadow broken. The crew erupted, not with cheers but with grim resolve. They weren't hiding anymore, they were fighting. Hamilton's voice broke through, bitter and sharp. You think you've won. You've only lit the fire higher. Now Washington won't save you, and Petrov won't stop until he drags you back into the dark. Alina's eyes stayed fixed on the horizon, her voice quiet but unyielding. Then let him come. How do you kill a ghost twice? The sea burned with fire from broken ships. Smoke stretched across the horizon, a black veil against dawn. The USS Defender rode heavy swells, her deck scarred, her crew weary but unbroken. Petrov's voice slithered through the comms one last time. You fight well, Blackwood, but we both know how this ends. You come back with me, or everyone dies. Alina stood in the center of the bridge, her shoulders squared, her voice steady. Not this time. Petrov chuckled, low and cruel. "Do you remember the mines? Do you remember how you screamed, 'You were mine once, you'll be mine again'?" The crew shifted uncomfortably, glancing between her and the horizon. Mitchell stood pale at the edge of the room, broken by indecision. Hamilton, however, didn't move at all. His silence was too sharp, too certain. And then the comm panel lit, not with Russian code but American. Encrypted. Hamilton's hand twitched toward it, but Morrison's voice cut the room. "Explain yourself, Admiral." Hamilton finally turned, his eyes flat, almost relieved. "Washington doesn't want her alive. They want her gone. Petrov does the work, we walk away clean. That's the order." The bridge fell silent. Mitchell's mouth opened, then closed. Hawkins whispered it like a curse. "You sold us out." Hamilton's jaw tightened. "I followed orders." Elena's eyes locked on him, calm, cold. "No, you followed fear." Morrison stepped between them, his voice sharp as steel. "And what about the crew, Admiral? Were they acceptable losses too?" Hamilton's silence was answer enough. The comm flared again, Petrov's voice cutting through. "Kingfish, I have my net. You cannot escape twice." Elena inhaled slowly, her eyes narrowing on the tactical screen. 3 Russian vessels closing in. A submarine surfacing behind them. Perfect encirclement. No gaps. No mercy. But she saw something no one else did. A flaw. A weakness hidden in arrogance. Her voice steadied. "They're overextending. Submarine can't cover their left flank if destroyer pushes. We break the net there. One chance." Mitchell shook his head, fear choking him. "It's suicide." Morrison's gaze stayed locked on her. "No, it's survival." She turned to the crew. "Stations ready. We fire on my mark." Hamilton barked, desperate. "Stand down, that's an order." But no one moved, not anymore. For the first time in 7 years, Elena Blackwood was in command. The seconds ticked, Russian missile locks painting their hull, warnings screaming across consoles. "Mark," Elena said. The ship roared. Tomahawks streaked low across the waves, cutting the silence with thunder. On the screen, fire bloomed, one Russian destroyer splitting apart, its shadow vanishing beneath the sea. The submarine shifted too late, its flank exposed. Elena's hand slammed the key again. Fire. Depth charges tore into the waves. A shockwave cracked the sea, the submarine's silhouette shattering. The net broke. The Defender surged through open water, alive. The crew erupted, not with cheers but with raw, stunned silence. They had survived the trap. But the cost was waiting. Hamilton stood pale, trembling, his mask stripped away. "You've doomed us all. Washington will bury this ship. They'll bury all of you." Elena stepped close, her voice low enough only he could hear. "Maybe, but at least they won't bury us in silence." Hamilton's eyes dropped. For the first time, shame cracked through the steel. He turned away, his power gone. Morrison placed a hand on Elena's shoulder. "It's done. You broke the net." But her eyes stayed fixed on the horizon. "Not yet." The comm hissed. Petrov's voice ragged, now furious. "Blackwood, you can run the sea, but you cannot run yourself. You are mine, always mine." Her lips parted, steady. "No, Petrov, I was never yours, and I never will be." She cut the channel with one motion. For the first time in years, silence didn't feel like a prison. It felt like freedom. Hours later, the sea was calm again. Smoke trailed on the horizon, but the Defender held steady. The crew moved with quiet reverence, their eyes different now. They didn't see an ordnance officer. They saw the ghost who saved them. Mitchell stood by her side, his voice low. "You should be in command, not me." She shook her head. "Command isn't about a title, it's about choices. Today you made the right one. You let them follow me." He swallowed hard, shame and gratitude tangled in his eyes. Hawkins approached, hesitant. "Commander Blackbird, whatever they call you, is it true? Were you an experiment?" Her eyes softened. "I was a soldier, that's all I ever was, and all I'll ever be." The young officer nodded, his respect unspoken. Morrison lingered as the others drifted away. You know this isn't over. Washington won't forget. Petrov won't stop. Alina's gaze drifted across the waves, her scars aching in the quiet. I know. Her voice lowered almost to herself. But neither will I. That night, alone in her quarters, she finally turned the photo on her desk face up. A younger version of herself, laughing beside her team, their arms slung across each other's shoulders. Ghosts, family, gone but not forgotten. Her hand lingered on the frame. A tear fell silent, carving a path down her cheek. She whispered it softly, as if the sea itself needed to hear. Sometimes dignity doesn't speak, it simply acts. The photo caught the low light, her reflection mingling with the faces of the lost. And for the first time in years, Alina Blackwood didn't look like a ghost. She looked alive,